Hello, hello! Welcome back to Marshmallow Reads, or welcome if you're new. I'm Marcy, and today I'm going to tell you all about the books that I read in April. This month there were 8 of them, so let's get to it. The first book I read this month was Babylon's Ashes by James S.A. Corey. This is the 6th book in the Expanse series. It took me a little while. It's pretty thick, but I really enjoyed this one. So because it's the 6th in this long series, I'm not going to give too many details about what happens in the plot, because otherwise it's going to spoil the 5 books that comes before it. But in general, this one takes place after the 5th book, and some bad stuff happened on Earth, and continuing this war going on in the solar system. So the parties are like Earth and Luna and Mars, and then out in the belt it's like the more like working class exploited people in the system. And in this book there is this new political military power called the Free Navy, and they're based off out in the belt. And the leader is Marco. He sucks ass, and he absolutely hates Captain Holden and the rest of the crew of the Rocinante, and you can feel his hatred for them in like any time he talks about them, so that's pretty good. Very quickly though, I do want to so one of my favorite characters in this entire series is some major like political bigwig on Earth. Her name is Viscerala, and she has like just some of the best lines in general and just like all across the series. My life has become a single ongoing revelation that I haven't been cynical enough. Just like every day you learn something new that just disappoints you even more about the human race as a whole, that kind of stuff. And she's just so witty, so sassy. Her tongue is just the sharpest in all the galaxy. Love her. Back to Marco, leader of the Free Navy, complete asshole. Not surprisingly, also a very shitty dad. He just completely tears down his son every chance he gets. Like for every little mistake that maybe Marco made himself, he's going to somehow turn it around and blame his son Philip. And it's awful. It's so infuriating to read. Like, I wish this kid had a better parent around, to help him grow up, because he's only like 15, 16 around there. Like, he's still forming his opinions and getting his grasp on the world and stuff, and he has this idiot as a father figure, like a little literal father. Anyway, at one point they are just barely survived this battle, and Philip, I guess, kind of messed up like a little bit in like, I forget what part of the ship. It was either like navigation or like the guns, and the kid starts crying because it was insanely stressful and they almost died. And the shitty dad is like, why are you crying? Crying's for girls. You're a man, be a man. It's like, ugh, I hate this. But anyway, you get lots of that. The story does resolve itself in a satisfying way. And as I find typical with these Expanse books, the first like 300 or so pages are definitely slower in pace. They are very information filled, very plot heavy, but I think it does a really good job at setting up the story as a whole to get, all the political intrigue and all the character development and character interactions in there that help set up and make the last like 200-ish pages that much more action-packed and juicy. Prepare yourself for that. If you've gotten to the 6th book, you know what it's gonna do. I really enjoyed the new additions to the Rocinante crew. Again, I don't really want to talk too much spoiler, so I'm not even gonna name these people, but you've seen them before in previous books, and they're great on the ship together. But like, because they're new, like for so long it had just been the original 4 on the Rossi, so adding 2 more people, even though they are have like pasts with these original 4 crew members, it takes a little while for them to like integrate and actually become part of the crew, part of the family. And I love that part, seeing them all work together at the end to like they're facing some immeasurable obstacles in the climax of this book, but they all come together and they like, you know, do what they do best and figure a way out of this in a way that I thought was pretty clever, if not terrifying. And yeah, seeing them like resolve everything and be able to like sit down and breathe for like 5 seconds together was really nice. And as a whole, this was yet another action-packed, political-packed continuation of this series, and I really enjoyed it. I gave Babylon's Ashes a 4 out of 5 stars. The next book I read in April was Sleepwalking by Meg Wolizter, and this book was originally published in the 80s, but I have only recently heard of it because, you know, my journey into BookTube, and I don't necessarily think this was for me. I did read it and I did mostly enjoy my time reading it, but it wasn't like my favorite. I'm overall happy I read it, but I'm not going to keep this book around because I'm not going to want to reread it, but that's okay. Trigger warning, there are several instances where they talk about suicide. So if you don't want to deal with that, just skip this one. But the general storyline is of this freshman college girl, Claire. She is at her first year at Swarthmore, this like small New England liberal arts college, and she is obsessed with this dead poet. And she finds 2 other girlfriends there that are also obsessed with their own unique dead poets. The other 2 girls, they're obsessed with like Sylvia Plath and Anne Sexton, and Claire, the main character, she's obsessed with Lucy Asher, who is a fake poet. The main character, Claire, has read every single poem and piece of work that this Lucy Asher has written, and I think when she first got obsessed with her, she was alive. And then during her time in high school, Lucy passed away due to suicide, and that like threw her for a loop, and Claire doubled down on her obsession with Lucy, and her whole world is now revolved around her. And you know, it's the same with the other 2 girls, and around campus they have been known as the Death Girls because of their obsession with these dead poets. And they'll like go to this girl's room, light candles, and just stay up literally all night reciting poems. Sometimes it's the same poem every single night, other times they like to spice it up, but it's always by their 3 obsessed authors. I could not really relate to Claire. It sounds pretty cringe to me, but like, you do you, but that's fine. Anyway, Claire's in college, doing her thing, trying to like get into her coursework, but it's not really going that well for her. She's not really interested in it. She's really only obsessed with Lucy, and she even gets like a upperclassman boyfriend and like seems to like him, but honestly she doesn't really seem to care much about him, or at least her actions don't reflect that. And at a point he is like, okay, you need to choose between me and Lucy, and she's like, I don't know, man. And that kind of sparks her to really think about, okay, what do I want in my life? Lucy Asher is what she wants in her life. So she leaves school, and very mild spoilers, it's just like the setup of the story, but if you don't want to hear any more, if that's enough to get you going, that's fine, you know, go for it. But I'm gonna get into just some mild spoilers here. When Claire leaves school, she goes to Lucy's parents' home because they're still alive, and it's only been a few years since Lucy passed, so they're still grieving. And Lucy decides to go to their home with her 1 piece of luggage, knock on their door, and say, hey, I'm a maid, and I live in people's houses to clean. Do you want to hire me? And they say yes. they take her in, they allow her to live in their guest room, like I think for a total of a couple weeks, but still, it's real weird. And Claire does not tell them that she knows anything about Lucy, but like she is overwhelmed with being in the presence of Lucy's home, not her spirit, but like her old room is there, and like it's so flippin' weird. I cringed so hard when I read this. I like could not imagine a real person doing this, living there. Both Claire and Lucy's parents form a relationship. They're friendly and they kind of work through their shit based on the situation. Like eventually they figure out, oh, she's obsessed with Lucy. I don't know, they just kind of help each other through this. It's like a sort of like group therapy grieving process that ends up working for everyone. I don't know. Back to non-spoilers. Final thoughts. I think it was fine. I didn't really relate to anyone in the story. Yeah, it was fine. I don't know. If you are a poetry buff, if you were a death girl before, maybe you still are, maybe you'd relate to this more. I gave this one a 3 out of 5. It's fine. All right. Next is Act Your Age, Eve Brown by Talia Hibbert. So I briefly talked about this one in my book haul from a few weeks ago, but this is the 3rd book in the Brown Sisters trilogy. The first 2 I also really, really enjoyed. I love this entire series. I kind of hope we get more of these characters because they're all just wonderful and I want more of their lives. Eve is the youngest of the 3 sisters and she is a mess. So while the other 2 sisters have their life together for the most part and are very like into their careers, Eve has struggled with that. She's never been able to like hold down a job for any reasonable, not reasonable, but like anything longer than about a year, and then stuff just doesn't work out. And her very wealthy parents have finally sat her down and said, okay, you need to get it together. You need to get a job and stick with it. So in order to force you to do that, we're giving you like 2 months to move out and we're going to stop your trust payments. And Eve kind of freaks out about this. She's never had this sort of like, not punishment, but like consequences put on her actions. So she's like, she freaks out, drives out into the countryside of England, and because they're in London, and she finds this bread and breakfast that needs a cook, and she's like, I can do that. I can bake. Cooking is very similar and she's good at that. Why not? She's never been a cook or a chef, but she's gonna try out for this job. The interview doesn't really go very well. She's like crying in her car after, it's storming, and she's ready to leave and just drop all this when the interviewer, Jacob, this guy here, is out looking for her because he really is desperate for a cook. He's gonna take anyone who's willing to work there. And when he finds her car, she backs up because she did not see him and breaks his arm. Oops. So she just spends like basically the rest of the book trying to make it up to him, working in the bed and breakfast as a cook. She's really good at it. She really enjoys making people food and like providing hospitality for these guests, and that's great. She's like figuring out what is working for her, and her and Jacob's relationship is also really sweet and funny because in many ways they are complete opposites. Jacob is very uptight and very particular about his appearance and how he presents himself to the world. Part of it because he's autistic and he had a shit childhood. His parents were awful in every way with him. So eventually, thankfully, his parents dropped him off with his aunt and she took care of him and raised him. And he is now a fairly normal human being. But because of certain characteristics that he is the opposite of Eve, because she is like full of bright colors and glitter and mess and isn't very organized, and Jacob is, but they have some commonalities and they tease each other a lot, and it does start off as a cute friendship that does develop into a very sweet romance, and they're very supportive of each other, and it was also kind of spicy, which was nice. We also met some of Jacob's friends that become Eve's friends, and they were really great and had very bright, colorful personalities as well. So yeah, like I said, I do hope we get to see more of these characters because I had a lot of fun reading their stories. And I gave this one a 5 out of 5 stars, so definitely check this one out if it sounds anything close up your alley. Next up is The Good House by Tananarive. Yo, this was such a good horror thriller novel. I kind of wish I had saved it for October, but that's fine. I want to be spooky all the time, so yeah, I definitely am going to check out more by this author. This was a very pleasant surprise. So in general, this is part haunted house, part demonic possession, very good spooky, scary vibes all throughout. And it focuses on this Black family who they've seen some shit and have gone through some tragedies, and they have a house in Washington, like rural Washington, and they're the only Black family in the entire town. There's some conflict there and it's a generational thing too. So it starts off with the main character's grandmother. She dealt with some stuff when she was first living there with her Native American husband. It starts off with a possessed girl being taken to her because this grandmother, she was a healer and had these special herbs that she would use to help those in the community, and she does help this girl, but in her helping this girl, it had lasting consequences that the rest of the family, you know, the next like 3 generations are suffering from those consequences still, and that's where this story picks up. So the main character, Angela, she's the granddaughter of that woman who owned this house, and she doesn't normally live there, but she likes to spend summers there with her son and her estranged or ex-husband. But unfortunately, one summer, some weirdness happened. This is part of the haunted house stuff. And her son dies in the house, and she's very physically haunted by that for obvious reasons. And she, I think it's like 2 years after that where like the real story starts, and she is still processing it, dealing with it, trying to move on in her life, and you know, reasonably struggling. And she is wanting to sell the house, so she goes back to Washington. More weird stuff is happening in the town that's linked back to the house and the land, and I'm not going to give too much more because it's just a very good haunted house, very good like demonic possession. There are gods in here and demons that are outside of like Christianity, which is usually, you know, the type of gods and demons you're talking about. I really enjoyed the different cultures that were brought into this horror novel. You have Louisiana Creole culture and West African culture and Haitian culture all coming together to be very spooky and very good. Like there's some like witchy stuff with the grandmother that is linked to some of these gods and why they're mad at her and her family. And Angela is trying to figure out what's going on. She doesn't believe in demons until she kind of has to, and then is trying to work things out, figure out what happened to her son, what's going on in this house, and trying to figure out how to fix it. And I really enjoyed the journey. It was both like interesting, captivating. It kept me reading, turning the page. The characters were intense, especially like the ex-husband. There are times where you do feel bad for him, but he's also an awful person, like a legitimately terrible human being. And it's emphasized by these demons. It's a lot. I know I'm not doing this justice, so please just go read it. Like, if you like horror at all, definitely check this one out. I loved it. I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. Next I have the Martian Chronicles by Bradbury. Unfortunately, I didn't quite enjoy this one as much as I hoped I would. I don't know, there was something about this like story collection that I didn't really love. So, as the name suggests, it chronicles the story of humans getting to Mars and dealing with whatever they find there. And part of it is they find indigenous Martian life who does not care for humans at all. And that was interesting. Like, imagine, like, after years of science and innovation, you, like, a small group of astronauts are able to land on Mars. They finally make it. They're so proud, so excited. And they meet aliens. They get to see aliens. They're like, oh my God. And they look like humans, like very similar human characteristics, and they speak English, and they hate you. They hate your guts. They don't want to see you. They don't want to talk to you. Get out of my house. That'd be pretty sad, pretty devastating. Yeah, I don't know. There are some good like parts of these stories that I enjoyed. The ending of the Earthmen story. Oh, that one was pretty fun. I did not see that one coming. That specific story was good to read. And it did have some good things to say about like how humans are bad for the environment wherever they go. Like this group of astronauts who first gets to Mars, it's their first night, they want to party, they're excited, and they want to bring out this gas stove from the ship. But one of the guys is like, no, we're gonna build a fire, we're gonna cook over it. He said, there will be time for copies of the New York Times to blow and caper and rustle across the lone gray Martian sea bottoms. Just like acknowledging that, okay, humans are here. Even the first day, we're gonna start trashing the place because that's just in our nature. And it's so sad. And I mean, it's true. Like, we are a blight. It's fine. It's not fine, but like, you know, one of the first steps to making it better is acknowledging it. And I mean, yeah, this came out in like the 40s originally, I think. So we've known this for a while. We just gotta start doing more stuff about it. One other thing, there were definitely too many N-words in this. There didn't need to be any, but there were. Yeah. I give this one a 3 out of 5 stars. It's pretty short. I don't regret reading it. It was fine. The next thing I read in April was an ARC, an advanced reading copy of this graphic novel, The Vein. This is by Eliot Rahal, illustrated by Emily Pearson and Fred C. Stressing. I have thoughts. So the basic premise of the story is there are 4 immortal vampires who are just going through time, robbing blood banks, living it up, being gay. It's fun. I did like the setup. And part of this, there's also this FBI agent who like learns about them in like the 50s and like spends years trying to track them down and prove their existence and capture them. And it could have been really interesting. It could have been a really cool like cat and mouse sort of story, but it's not that. There's like, it's like there's pieces of the story that we're missing. Like the scenes jump from vampires robbing a blood bank to FBI agent in his office talking to his boss. And the vampires are never really aware of the FBI guy until like way later on, and it just doesn't, I'm not explaining this right, but it doesn't seem like there's a lot of, how do I say this? It was just kind of confusing, like jumping between the timelines, because they're vampires. There's pretty big time skips. I think we might even start in the 20s. I could have gotten that wrong. But like you jump from like the 20s to the 40s, 60s, 80s. Like it's not a long book. And not a lot of time is given to developing the actual narrative. Like I get that the FBI guy really wants to hunt these guys down. everyone's motivations are never really mentioned. You just kind of have to assume part of their personalities. I don't know. I never really felt like I could connect to any of these characters. I never felt myself rooting for one side over the other. It just felt kind of empty. I don't know. Like there wasn't really any transition between different timelines and scenes. So the story itself was lacking. There were some horror scenes, like graphic, like gore scenes that did work well for me. Like the very first scene, they're like robbing the blood bank, which looks like a literal bank, like a bank vault. I don't think you would keep blood bags in there. Are those drawers even refrigerated? I don't know. Maybe it's just an aesthetic choice, whatever. Like there were definitely pieces that worked, but the entire work as a whole, not so great. The art style that I mostly did like, but it could use some work. I think the facial expressions and like the bodies of the people felt stiff and didn't have a lot going on there. I don't know. I'm not an artist. I am pulling this out of my butt. It was just okay. Yeah, I gave this one a 2 out of 5 stars. Maybe skip it. This video is already too long, so I'm going to try to keep this review as short as possible. I think I'm going to devote an entire other video to this one book because it made me so mad. But for now, let me tell you my brief thoughts on The King of Crows by Libba Bray. This is the 4th and final installment in the Diviner series. A series, up until this book, that I loved. I absolutely adored this series. And although the first book came out like 10 years ago, I only started reading it about a year ago. And I blew through the first 3 novels, and they're not small, they're like substantial, and I loved them so very much because of the setting and the characters. The most important thing that I loved about these books were the characters. So these are diviners. They are kids, late teens, who have these special powers. They're all connected because of their powers, and they find each other because of them. And they the type of powers can be like some light pyromancy, some if you take an object and you read it like it belongs to someone, you can read their thoughts or what they thought about, like their memories when they had this object, that kind of stuff. Like nothing overpowered. They're, you know, but still, it's a bit of magic. And them finding each other, becoming friends, becoming basically family was wonderful. And like the banter they would have, because this is set in 1920s New York. So you get some real weird slang, some very interesting turns of phrases, and it was great. It was so fun watching them like make fun of each other and enjoy each other's company, and it was great. And the setting was great too. Like the 1920s New York felt alive, felt real. You have the very black-centric Harlem compared to the very ritzy, white-centric Manhattan, and the crossover between all these groups of people, because the diviners themselves, they come from all walks of life. Some are black and from Harlem, some are white and from the Midwest and are in New York trying to find fame. Others are from immigrant families. It's so good. Like there's some really good representation here, and just it was really, really nice to see this group of friends come together and discover stuff about themselves. I need to go faster. Okay. Sorry. So my disappointment when I read this book was immeasurable, because it takes away the 2 main things that made the series good. It takes the characters out of New York, so you lose that setting. They're just in random small towns across the US that we've never heard of before and we do not care about. And then the characters, so in the first 3 books, they're mostly apart for pieces of them. And then finally, at the end of the 3rd book, everyone's together at once. They're all like training together to face this big bad. The big bad guy being the King of Crows. Name of the book. He's been like the spooky background figure for the entire series, and now they're finally getting to face him. But for 300 pages of this book, these characters are apart again. They're in like little groups doing their own little stories. So you don't have the banter, the same like interactions between the characters that you've been wanting. It was very frustrating because it felt like most of the book was filler, nonsense. Why is this even here? And then when the climax finally gets to, you know, the point, the climax happens, part of it off screen. The characters barely work together. They barely do their thing. And the big bad guy is dealt with in such a manner that makes no sense. No sense. And it's so fast and it's so dumb. Okay, I'm gonna stop there. I could talk forever on this, so I'm just gonna do another video with it. In general, if you're interested in this series, maybe think about stopping at number 3. Like, I still highly recommend books 1 through 3, especially number 2, Lair of Dreams is my favorite. But maybe don't spend however many hours reading this very thick book filled with mostly filler. Maybe go watch a spoiler video. Maybe listen to the audiobook on like 3x speed. Like, it doesn't require your attention. I originally gave this one a 3 out of 5 stars. Honestly, I might switch it to a 2. Very disappointing. Okay, on to the last book of April. The last book I read this month was 3 Parts Dead by Max Gladstone. I really enjoyed this one. This is the first book in a series, and in general, it would fit into urban fantasy. Not exactly like the urban cities that we would know. So kind of like a modern city, but instead of like all of the technology that we have, it's like cool magic powered stuff. The city that we're focusing on used to be run, I guess, by 2 powerful gods. But one died in like a war between gods and the deathless kings or whatever. And now the remaining god, the fire god, he also died. This is not spoilers, it's like the very first page of the book. So the fire god, he's dead. And some necromancers, this like almost like law firm sort of people, they are hired to resurrect him. Our main character, she is just like graduated from this fancy magic. I'm saying magic, but they're calling it craft. That's their term for it. She graduated from this fancy craft school, but was like unceremoniously kicked out. And that's a kind of an issue because she was literally kicked out of the school, a school that is in the clouds. So she almost died, but because she's good at her craft, she was able to save herself. One of the necromancers that was hired to resurrect this god hears about her, hires her, and now this is her first gig on a trial basis. If she does well for this case, she'll be hired on as a full craftswoman. So the newbie, Tara, has to go investigate. There's like a murder scene, another very large murder scene, and she has to piece together all this information to figure out who did it. So it's like part mystery, and the city itself is also really, really cool because it has these chain-smoking priests of the fire god. There is like the police force is these people who wear this like suit, or who can put on this suit of glass that like transforms them into justice, and they all become like one hive mind, and they're just like working together. They're really, really fast, really strong, but only when they're wearing the suit. The story itself is pretty fast paced, so it like gets you the information that you need to know at the beginning, and then it just gets going. And I really appreciated that. The villain in this story was really good. He was a very compelling villain. I hated his guts. So De Novo, he is this great craftsman. He is like renowned, world renowned for his work, and he was Tara's old mentor, old professor that she worked under at this fancy school, and it's because of him that she got kicked out. And when she worked in his lab, she was basically being abused by him, and he abuses everyone he comes into contact with. Thankfully, I don't know any personal stories about this, but I have read and heard stories about nightmare PIs, principal investigators, professors like De Novo, who take advantage of their students and work them practically to death, and just create a very awful and toxic environment for them to live in. And you hear bits about Tara's experience with him, and it's sad, it's rough. So yeah, that made him a very easy person to hate, a very good villain. So the dialogue isn't super realistic, but there are some really good one-liners, just like all over the place. For example, there's a part where the craftswoman that Tara is working under, she is talking about De Novo and how he looks really, really young for his age. And she says it's because he drinks the life of those who come too close to him. He steals their youth. And also, he moisturizes. Like, that's a good line. It's a good joke. So yeah, this was really witty, really fun, a really imaginative world that you get to discover as Tara discovers it. A bit about the magic system. So I wouldn't consider this like a hard magic system. There isn't like a lot of rules in it. There's definitely some though. And it deals with like glyphs, so like symbols and stuff, like you carve it into yourself. Like Tara, she like has a glyph on her chest that she can pull a knife out of, which is really fun. You can also like make the glyphs on the ground to like resurrect a body through necromancy. I really enjoyed the magic, and I really was interested in the like divinity part of this. So like I said, there were two gods in this city, and their followers, worshippers, have a very close relationship to them. Like they can literally talk to their gods and feel their divine love. And the way it was described in the book made me jealous of these worshippers. Like, damn, I want to feel that sort of divine love. Like, it was really, really nice. Yeah, I really enjoyed reading this one. I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. Whew, that was a lot. If you made it this far, thank you. I hope you enjoyed it. I read a lot in April, and they were all, for the most part, pretty good. Yeah, I'm definitely going to have to make a King of Crows or just like Diviners series video. Yeah, that's gonna probably be coming out soon because I still have so many things, especially spoilery things I want to say about this book, but it's gonna have to wait. If you liked this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. If you really liked this video, then consider subscribing to my channel. I do videos like this. Currently, it's every other week, but with the summer coming up, I'm going to try to get at least 3 videos out a month. We'll see how that goes. I hope you all have an amazing week. Do something nice for yourself. I'll see you in the next one. Bye!